She was on the floor of Terminal B, wheelchair tipped sideways, and not one person in that crowded airport moved to help her. They just stood there, phones out, recording. That was the moment Wyatt Mercer stopped walking. Most people spend their whole lives waiting for someone else to do the right thing. Wyatt had already spent 4 years watching the world pass his daughter by. He wasn't waiting anymore. If this story moves you, hit like, drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this one travels. The rain had been coming down since noon, and by the time Wyatt Mercer pulled into the short-term parking at Hargrove International, the sky had gone the color of old iron. He didn't mind the rain. He'd learned a long time ago that weather was just weather. It didn't care about your plans, your grief, your 8-year-old daughter sitting in the back seat asking for the 4th time whether they could stop at the diner with the strawberry pancakes on the way home. Maybe, he said, which was his standard answer for things that depended on how the next hour went. That means no, Chloe said. That means maybe. Dad, you always say maybe when you mean no. He glanced at her in the rearview mirror. She was watching the rain streak down the window with her chin in her hand, her dark braids still slightly uneven from that morning. He'd redone the left one 3 times and still couldn't get it as smooth as her mother used to. She'd stopped pointing that out about a year ago. He wasn't sure if that was progress or just her learning to let things go. Your grandpa's flight lands in 20 minutes, Wyatt said. We pick him up, we go home, we have dinner. If there's time, we'll do the diner. There won't be time. Then we'll do it Saturday. You said that last Saturday. He didn't have a response for that one, so he didn't give one. They parked on level 4 and took the elevator down to arrivals. Chloe held his hand the whole way through the sliding doors. Not because she needed to, she hadn't needed to hold his hand in public since she was maybe 5, but because she could tell he was slightly on edge. She did that sometimes. Picked up on things he thought he was hiding. He wasn't sure if that was a sign of a perceptive kid or a sign that he was a bad actor. Probably both. Hargrove International on a Tuesday afternoon was exactly the kind of chaos Wyatt had trained himself to move through without reacting to. Too many people, too much noise, the specific smell of industrial carpet and recycled air and fast food grease from the subway 2 gates down. He'd done 2 tours in places that made airports look like libraries. He'd learned to separate signal from noise a long time ago, to see what was actually happening inside a crowd rather than getting swallowed by the surface of it. So when they came around the corner into the main arrivals hall, he noticed it before Chloe did. The woman in the wheelchair was against the far wall, near the car rental kiosks. She was maybe 30, maybe a little younger, hard to tell from this distance, wearing a charcoal blazer that was expensive even from 50 feet away. Her dark hair was pulled back but coming loose on one side. The wheelchair was high-end, not a hospital model, the kind that had clearly been customized. And she was tilted. Not fully over, but close. One of the front casters had caught on the edge of the tile threshold where the flooring transitioned, and the chair had pitched at a sharp angle. Her left arm was braced against the floor, keeping herself from going all the way down, but her grip was shaking. Standing over her, not helping her, was a man in a charcoal suit. Tall, maybe 45, the kind of haircut that cost $300. He had his arms crossed, and he was talking down at her in a low, controlled voice that Wyatt couldn't hear from here, but could read in his posture as clearly as a street sign. And then there were the people, maybe 40, 50 bystanders. Some were slowing down to look. Some had stopped completely. 6 or 7 had their phones out. Nobody moved toward her. Wyatt said, "Chloe, stay right here." She followed the direction of his gaze. "Dad, right here. Don't move." He was already walking. The man's name, Wyatt would find out later, was Garrison Holt. He was a senior partner at Ashford Capital and had been for 11 years. He was also, by most accounts in the circles he traveled in, the kind of person who measured everything by what it cost and everything by what it was worth. Sienna Ashford, the woman currently half-tipped out of her own wheelchair while he watched, had once been the most valuable thing in his portfolio. "This is what I'm talking about," Garrison was saying, his voice just low enough to seem reasonable while being loud enough to carry. "You can't even navigate an airport terminal on your own. You think you can navigate a board meeting in Tokyo? A shareholder summit in Frankfurt?" Garrison. Her voice was flat, controlled. Wyatt could hear it now as he came closer. Get someone to help me up. You should have brought your nurse. I don't have a nurse. Then you should have brought someone. He spread his hands. That's all I'm saying, Sienna. This is exactly what I've been trying to explain to your family. The optics alone. The optics, she repeated. You are the CEO of a publicly traded company. You represent, I know what I represent. Then act like it. He glanced at the people watching, and something in his expression shifted. Not embarrassment, but awareness. He was performing. She was the prop. This isn't about sympathy. This is about reality. The board needs someone who can help me up, she said again. Right now or get out of my way. He looked at her for a moment, then he looked at his watch. Your car's outside. I'll tell Marcus to... I'm not getting in your car. Sienna, I said I'm not getting in your car. Wyatt reached them. He didn't announce himself. He didn't make a production of it. He just stepped into the space between Garrison and the wheelchair, crouched down, and said quietly, Got you. Tell me where to put my hands. She looked at him. He'd seen that look before, in field hospitals, in emergency rooms, in the faces of people who'd been waiting so long for basic decency that they stopped expecting it. The look was wariness mixed with something that hadn't quite decided yet whether it was relief or resentment. The frame, she said after a second. Right side, near the axle. He found the grip point and steadied the chair. She pushed up with her left arm while he stabilized the chassis, and they righted it smoothly. Not perfectly. There was a moment where the caster stuck again and she had to direct him to angle it differently, but within 30 seconds she was upright, chair level, both hands on the push rims. She was breathing harder than she wanted to let on. He pretended not to notice. Garrison had not moved. Who are you? He asked, looking at Wyatt the way people looked at things that had appeared in the wrong place. Wyatt straightened up and turned to face him. He was an inch shorter than Garrison and about 40 pounds heavier, most of it still in his shoulders and chest from years of military PT. He'd been out of the Navy for 4 years and hadn't lost the posture. Nobody, he said. Are you with her team? I'm a guy who was walking through the airport. Wyatt kept his voice level. Is there a reason you're standing there instead of helping her? Garrison's jaw tightened. This is a private matter. Didn't look very private. I'd suggest you mind your own business. Wyatt held his gaze for a moment. He wasn't angry exactly. Anger required surprise, and nothing about Garrison Holt surprised him. He'd met versions of this man in every institution he'd ever moved through, men who confused cruelty with efficiency and called the combination professionalism. I'm going to help her get where she's going, Wyatt said. You can follow if you want, or you can go do whatever it is you were about to do. Garrison looked at Sienna. This isn't over. I know, she said. He straightened his jacket and walked away through the crowd, and the crowd parted for him in the way crowds parted for men who looked like they expected to be let through. Wyatt turned back to Sienna. She was watching Garrison go with an expression that wasn't relief and wasn't sadness. It was something more like tired recognition, like she'd seen this particular scene play out before and had stopped being surprised by the ending. Thank you, she said. She didn't say it warmly. She said it the way you said it to someone who'd done something technically helpful that you hadn't asked for. Where are you going? He said. I was going to the rental car counter. You want me to I can manage. Okay. He stepped back. She moved the push rims forward, and the right front caster immediately caught the same threshold seam. The chair didn't tip this time, but she had to stop, back up, and approach it at a different angle. She did it without asking for help. He watched without offering any. It took her 3 tries to clear the seam. When she finally rolled clear onto smooth tile, she stopped for a moment, back straight, not turning around. Then, the threshold. Yeah, he said. They shouldn't build them like that. No, they shouldn't. She turned her head slightly, not enough to look at him directly. What's your name? Wyatt. Wyatt Mercer. A pause. Sienna. I know, he said. I've seen you on the news a few times. The Ashford Capital merger. Something shifted in her expression. Not displeasure exactly, but the slight tightening of someone who'd just been reminded of something they wanted to set down. That was 9 months ago, she said. Yeah, he paused. The merger fell through. The merger fell through, she agreed, and the way she said it had 7 different things underneath it, none of which she was going to name. He heard his name then, small, insistent, from behind him. Dad? He turned. Chloe had not stayed where he'd put her. She was 6 feet away, backpack slung over both shoulders, watching him with the particular expression she wore when she was deciding whether something was her business. I told you to stay put, he said. I moved a little bit. She looked past him at Sienna. Is she okay? She's fine. Her arm is scraped. Chloe pointed at Sienna's left forearm, where a red mark ran from wrist to elbow, the kind you got from catching yourself on tile. Sienna looked at her own arm, then at Chloe, with the slightly uncertain expression of someone who wasn't accustomed to small children stating obvious facts with no filter. I'm okay, Sienna said. It might bleed later, Chloe said. Chloe, Wyatt said. What? I'm just saying. She should clean it. She looked up at Wyatt. Do you have your kit? I always have my kit. Can she use some of it? He'd carried a basic first aid kit in the inside pocket of whatever jacket he was wearing every day since he'd gotten out of the Navy. Not a big kit, 4 bandages, antiseptic wipe, medical tape, 2 Advil in a small bag, but enough for most of what came up in a day. Old habit. Or maybe not habit. Maybe just the thing that had replaced his service when he came home. He looked at Sienna. It's up to her. Sienna looked at Chloe for a moment, then at the mark on her arm, then at Wyatt. Something in her face had shifted from the careful blankness she'd been wearing since he walked up. That's... She paused. Sure. Thank you. They found a row of empty seats near a closed gate down the concourse. Wyatt sat across from Sienna and opened the kit on his knee. Chloe sat on his right, watching with the intense focus she brought to anything she'd decided was important. You're a doctor? Sienna asked while he cleaned the mark with the antiseptic wipe. Medic. Navy. I got out 4 years ago. What do you do now? Home health aide, mostly elderly patients. He pressed the wipe flat along the length of the scrape. It wasn't bad. Surface only, no real damage. Some PT recovery work on the side. Is that... She paused, reconsidered something. Is that what you wanted to do after the military? He thought about how to answer that. It's what was there when I needed something to be there. She didn't push. He appreciated that. Does it hurt? Chloe asked. A little, Sienna said. My dad says pain means it's healing. He says a lot of things, does he? Chloe considered this seriously. Yeah, most of them are pretty good, though. Something moved in Sienna's face then. It wasn't quite a smile. It was the beginning of one, the involuntary kind, the kind that happened before you could decide not to let it. Wyatt applied a bandage strip and pressed it smooth. Done, he said. She looked at it. The bandage was plain beige, the generic drugstore kind. It looked slightly absurd against the sleeve of her $2,000 blazer. She didn't say anything about that. Where are you staying? He said. There's a hotel near the business district. I have a suite there. She was already moving toward her phone. I'll call my driver. Your phone's cracked, Chloe observed. Sienna looked at the screen. The right corner had a spreading fracture across it, probably from when she'd gone sideways. It still lit up, but with a dead strip down one side. I must have dropped it, she said. It happened when your chair tipped, Wyatt said. I saw it. Sienna stared at the broken screen for a moment. She pulled up her contacts, or tried to. The dead strip covered the first letter of the alphabet, which was where the number she needed was. She navigated around it slowly, holding the phone at different angles, trying to access it from the working portion of the screen. It wasn't working. She lowered the phone. It was the first time since he'd walked up that she looked, not weak exactly, but tired. Genuinely, deeply tired in a way that had nothing to do with the hour, or the flight, or the rain outside. The kind of tired that lived in you. There's a hotel shuttle, Wyatt said. Front of departures, blue sign. I can point you to it. I know where the shuttle is, she said, then quieter. The hotel entrance isn't accessible. I tried it last time. The ramp is around the side, and it's not marked. He nodded slowly. And I have a meeting tonight. She was saying this more to herself than to him, working through it. At 7. At the hotel. Holt will... She stopped. Started again. There are people who need to see me walk into that room looking like I have my life together. Wyatt looked at her. She was doing what he recognized from the field, triaging, listing what was broken, what still worked, what needed solving first. He looked at Chloe. She was watching Sienna with that particular expression she wore around his elderly patients. Not pity, but something attentive and gentle that she'd developed somehow, maybe from watching him, maybe from something inherent in her. He made a decision. "We have a car," he said. "My apartment's 20 minutes from here. You can use my phone to reach your driver, or we can find someone who—" "I'm not going to your apartment," Sienna said immediately. "I know." He held up a hand. "I'm not suggesting you move in. I'm suggesting you don't stand in an airport with a broken phone trying to navigate a shuttle service that drops you at a hotel entrance you already know doesn't work." She was quiet. "I have a landline," he said. "I know that's a weird thing to still have, but I do. You can make whatever calls you need. We'll figure out your driver, figure out the hotel entrance thing, and you're at your 7 o'clock. Why would you—" She stopped. He shrugged. "Because Chloe will talk about this for a week if I just put you on a shuttle." "I absolutely will," Chloe confirmed. Sienna looked at the girl, then at Wyatt, then at the cracked screen in her hand. 30 minutes, she said. "Sure. I mean it, 30 minutes and I need to be gone." 30 minutes, he said. "What?" His apartment was on the 3rd floor of a building that had probably been nice in the late 90s and had settled into comfortable mediocrity since. The elevator worked, which was the important thing. He'd checked that first when he'd found the place, before he even looked at the square footage. Chloe had been 6 then, and he'd been thinking about strollers. Now he thought about it for different reasons. The work he did, the patients he visited, the things you noticed when you spent your days thinking about what moved through the world without handrails. The apartment itself was exactly what you'd expect from a single father making homemade wages with a part-time PT side gig. The furniture didn't match. The bookshelves were a combination of military history paperbacks, Chloe's chapter books, and medical reference texts he still pulled out occasionally. The kitchen table had a crayon mark on the far left corner that he'd tried to sand off twice and given up on. The walls in the hallway had exactly 12 drawings taped at child height, Chloe's mostly, from the last 2 years, landscapes and animals, and one extremely ambitious attempt at a dragon that Wyatt thought was secretly the best thing in the apartment. Sienna took all of this in from the doorway while Wyatt propped it open. "The bathroom has a grab bar," he said. "I installed it when my father visited last year. He uses a cane." She wheeled herself in without commenting on the space. The apartment was narrow, but she could move through it. He'd watched the clearance automatically as they'd come up in the elevator, measuring against the chair width, and it was tight in a few places, but workable. Chloe dropped her backpack on the couch and went straight to the kitchen. "Do you want water? We also have apple juice, and I think there's lemonade, but I'm not sure if it's still good." "Water's fine," Sienna said. "I'll check the lemonade anyway," Chloe said, which was something she said any time she'd already decided to check something. Wyatt pointed Sienna toward the phone, actual landline, actual corded handset, sitting on the shelf near the television like something from 1997. She raised an eyebrow at it. "It works," he said. "I believe you." "The number for the cab company I use is on the notepad next to it. They have an accessible van. They're usually 15 minutes. She looked at the notepad. The cab company number was there, along with his patients' names and appointment times, and a grocery list that included the word waffles underlined twice. "You really do think of everything," she said. "Not warmly, not critically, just observationally." "I have a kid," he said. "You have to think of everything, or you're the reason the day falls apart." He went to the kitchen to start something for dinner. Chloe's grandfather's flight would be another hour at least, delays on top of the rain, and she'd been promised food. He could hear Sienna on the phone in the living room, her voice shifting into the register he recognized from the airport. Controlled, clipped, the specific tone of someone managing an entire situation through force of will and tone. Chloe climbed onto the kitchen stool and watched him pull things from the refrigerator. "She's sad," Chloe said. "You don't know that." "Dad, she's sad. You can tell." He didn't argue with her. Chloe had always been accurate about people in ways he'd stopped questioning. Some people are going through hard things, he said. Is that why that man was being mean to her? He paused with his hand on the egg carton. You heard that? Kind of. He was loud. She picked at the edge of the kitchen counter. He was talking about her like she was broken. Some people, Wyatt said carefully, see a wheelchair and they stop seeing the person. That's stupid. Yes, it is. She's not broken, Chloe said. She got herself across that whole airport with a broken phone and nobody helping her. That's not broken. That's the opposite of broken. He looked at his daughter for a moment. She was 8 years old, and she'd just articulated something it took most adults decades to figure out. He didn't say anything about that because he didn't want to make her self-conscious about it. He just pulled out the cutting board. Pasta okay? He said. You always make pasta. Because you always eat pasta. I would also eat strawberry pancakes. We'll do pancakes Saturdays, he said. This Saturday. In the living room, Sienna's voice had dropped, the clipped corporate tone softening into something harder to identify. He caught fragments without trying to. No, that was never the arrangement. A pause. I don't care what Garrison told them. Another pause, longer. I know, I'll be there. When she came back into the kitchen doorway, she looked like someone who'd just set down something very heavy and wasn't sure if she was allowed to feel relieved about it. The van's coming, she said. 20 minutes. Good. You want to sit? He nodded toward the kitchen table. She hesitated. The 30-minute window she'd given herself was already becoming something she wasn't quite calculating the same way. She wheeled herself to the table and stopped at the end, across from where Chloe had repositioned herself to see into the kitchen. What are you making? Sienna asked Chloe. He's making pasta. I wanted pancakes. What kind of pancakes? Chloe's face brightened exactly the way it did when an adult actually engaged with something she'd said instead of around it. Strawberry. The ones with the real strawberries in the batter, not the syrup kind. There's a diner near the airport that does them. She shot a look at Wyatt. We were going to go there today. We said maybe, Wyatt called. He says maybe when he means no, Chloe told Sienna confidentially. So I've heard, Sienna said, and this time the beginning of a smile made it all the way to her face. It was a small thing, but Wyatt saw it from the stove, and he noted it the way he noted signs in his patients, not with sentiment, but with the quiet recognition that something that had been closed was, for just a moment, slightly less closed. They ate at the kitchen table. He hadn't planned on Sienna eating, but Chloe had set a place for her without asking, and Sienna hadn't said anything, and so there they were, a former Navy medic, his 8-year-old daughter, and the CEO of a publicly traded company eating pasta at a table with a crayon mark on the left corner while rain came down the windows on all 3 sides. Chloe talked mostly. She always did. She told Sienna about her 3rd-grade teacher, Mrs. Patel, who was excellent in every way except that she pronounced especially as especially, and Chloe found this deeply troubling. She explained her ongoing science project, which was a germination experiment involving bean seeds, 3 different kinds of soil, and a level of investment that Wyatt privately thought was going to end in tears when the beans failed to perform to her expectations. She asked Sienna whether she'd ever been on a plane, and when Sienna said yes, many times, Chloe asked which was the best country she'd been to, which Sienna answered without hesitation as Iceland, which Chloe had never heard of, which led to a 5-minute conversation about glaciers. Sienna answered everything. She was not warm, exactly, not in the unguarded way Chloe was warm, but present. Actually genuinely present in a way that Wyatt recognized was not how she'd been 20 minutes ago. His phone buzzed. His father-in-law texting from the gate. Flight delayed until 8. Don't wait at the airport, just come when I land. He texted back and set the phone down. Sienna's van buzzed at the door downstairs at 8:17, and she went for her phone automatically to check the time, forgetting the broken screen for a second and then remembering. You need a new phone, Chloe said. I'll get one tomorrow. My dad's extra phone works. He has 2. Chloe, Wyatt said. What? You do. Sienna reached for the push rims on her chair. She stopped before she started moving. I don't usually, She paused, tried again. I don't usually do this. Do what? He said. Sit in strangers' kitchens. She looked at the table. Eat pasta. The pasta wasn't great, he said. I'm better with eggs. It was fine. Another pause. The pasta was fine. Devastating review, he said. Something crossed her face. Not quite a laugh, but the muscular precursor to one. The thing that happened in your face when something caught you off guard. She covered it by moving toward the hallway. He walked her to the elevator. Chloe came too, still talking, explaining her theory about why Iceland had the best hot springs despite being very cold, which she had learned from a book she'd gotten at the school library and was currently the main subject of her life. At the elevator, Sienna turned. Your daughter, she said. She looked at Chloe, who was in the middle of explaining geological thermal activity, and didn't notice the look. Yeah, he said. Her mother? 3 years ago, cardiac event. She was 29. Sienna's expression changed, not into pity, which he appreciated, into something more like recognition, the acknowledgement of a specific weight. I'm sorry, she said. Thank you. The elevator opened. She moved into it. Chloe had found a pause in her geological lecture. Will you come back? Chloe asked. Sienna looked at her, then at Wyatt, then at the floor number panel. I don't know, she said. You should, Chloe said. We have eggs. He's better with eggs. The elevator doors closed. Wyatt stood in the hallway with his daughter beside him, listening to the cables work. She'll come back, Chloe said. You don't know that. Dad, I totally know that. He looked down at her. She had her arms crossed and her chin tilted up the way she did when she'd made a determination. He didn't argue with her. He turned off the kitchen light and went to find his keys so they could go pick up her grandfather, and the rain came down against the building's west face, steady and indifferent, the way rain always was. He thought about the woman in the elevator, not in any particular way, not with any particular feeling, just the way you thought about a thing that had happened in the middle of an ordinary day and turned it into something else. The way a normal Tuesday could become the kind of day you'd find yourself circling back to later, looking for the moment where everything quietly changed direction. He didn't know if it had. He wasn't the kind of man who made predictions, but he thought about her, briefly, and then he grabbed his jacket and his keys and told Chloe to put her shoes back on, and they went back out into the rain. She came back 4 days later. Wyatt was on his knees in the kitchen fixing the cabinet hinge that had been loose since December when the buzzer went. Chloe answered the intercom before he could get up, which was her standard operating procedure whenever she was home and conscious. Hello? A pause from the speaker. Then, it's Sienna Ashford. I was here last. I know who you are, Chloe said, with a certainty that required no elaboration, and buzzed her in. Wyatt got off his knees. He was in a gray t-shirt with a small paint stain on the left sleeve and his work jeans, and he had a screwdriver in his hand, and he thought briefly about whether he should change anything about any of that, and then decided not to because it was 11 in the morning on a Saturday, and this was his apartment. He opened the door before she reached it. She looked different than she had at the airport. Not worse, not better, different. She was wearing a dark blue sweater instead of the blazer, and her hair was down, which changed the geometry of her face somehow, made her look slightly less armored. She had a new phone. She'd figured out the elevator. I was in the neighborhood, she said. He looked at her. She lived in a hotel suite in the business district 12 blocks away. He didn't say that. Come in, he said. She came in. Chloe was already stationed at the kitchen table with her bean germination project, which had progressed significantly since Tuesday, and now involved a hand-drawn chart on graph paper tracking millimeter growth across 3 soil types. The beans are growing, Chloe announced without looking up. I can see that, Sienna said. Soil B is winning. I thought soil A would win because it had the most nutrients on the package, but soil B has better drainage, and I think that's more important. Drainage, Sienna repeated, for the roots. You can't have roots if the water just sits there. Chloe finally looked up. Do you want to see the chart? I'd actually like to see the chart. Wyatt put the screwdriver down and washed his hands, while Sienna wheeled herself to the table, and Chloe began an explanation of her methodology that was, objectively, more thorough than most project presentations he'd seen adults give. He made coffee. He made 3 cups on the assumption that people who showed up somewhere unexpectedly had probably decided they wanted to be there for longer than they were admitting. He set one at the edge of the table where Sienna could reach it without asking, and she looked at it and then at him and didn't say anything and picked it up. She stayed 2 hours. They didn't talk about Garrison Holt. They didn't talk about the board or the company or the strategic marriage Wyatt didn't yet know about. They talked about Chloe's beans and about Iceland, which Chloe had done more research on since Tuesday, and about whether the coffee Wyatt made was actually better than hotel coffee, or whether Sienna was just saying that, which led to a minor disagreement about the importance of the machine versus the bean that Chloe settled by announcing that she preferred hot chocolate and didn't understand why adults complicated things. When Sienna left, Chloe stood at the window and watched the street below. She parked down the block, Chloe said. She drove herself. Okay, he said. I thought people like her had drivers. Some do, some don't. She doesn't want people to know she's here. Chloe turned from the window. Right? He thought about how to answer that. She gets to decide who knows where she is, he said. Chloe considered this. That's fair, she said, and went back to her beans. She came back the following Saturday, and then the one after that. It was never announced. She didn't text first, and he didn't have her number anyway, only the hotel's, which he'd found in the cab company's record when he'd called to confirm her ride that first night. She just appeared, usually mid-morning, usually after whatever the week had been had accumulated enough weight that she needed somewhere to set it down. He didn't ask why she kept coming. That felt like the kind of question that would make her stop. What he noticed instead, because noticing things without making them into a conversation was something he'd gotten good at, was how she was in the apartment versus how she'd been at the airport. At the airport, she'd been the woman managing a crisis, the CEO in the expensive blazer triaging a situation. Here she was something else. Smaller in the specific way people got smaller when they stopped performing. She'd take her jacket off. She'd accept coffee without being asked after the second visit. She'd lean sideways in the chair in a way that looked physically easier, less deliberate. She'd laugh at things, Chloe said. Real laughs, not the polished kind, the ones that caught her off guard because Chloe had zero interest in being charming and a great deal of interest in being accurate. The third Saturday, Wyatt was reorganizing his medical reference shelf when she said, out of nowhere, "My stepbrother thinks I should step down." He kept his hand on the book he was reshelving. From the company? From the board? From everything. She was looking at the window, not at him. He says the disability makes the optics complicated. He says it like that? Optics? He's polished about it. They all are. It's never, you can't do this because you're paralyzed. It's always, we need to think carefully about the optics, or the shareholders have concerns about continuity, or she stopped. There's a man they want me to marry. He turned around. She was still looking at the window. His name is Fletcher Dane. He runs a property development firm. He has money, he has connections, and more importantly, he looks like someone the board can trust to keep things stable. She said the last 2 words like they were in quotation marks she couldn't quite remove. My family arranged the introduction 6 weeks ago. Garrison has been pushing for it as a condition of renewed board confidence. That's not how board confidence works, Wyatt said. No, it's not. But it's how my family works. She finally looked at him. My stepbrother owns 14%. My aunt controls another 9%. They've been aligned against me since the accident. How long ago was the accident? 18 months. She said it flatly, the way people said numbers they'd repeated so many times they'd stopped feeling the weight of them. A car accident. I was on my way back from a meeting. The other driver ran a red. I had surgery 3 times, PT for 8 months, and at the end of all that I could walk about 30 feet with a cane and significant pain, or I could use the chair and function at capacity. She paused. It wasn't a hard choice, but my family treated it like a surrender. Wyatt sat down in the chair across from her. He didn't say anything about strength or courage or how hard that must have been, because those were things people said when they didn't know what else to do, and he did know what else to do, which was to just be in the room with someone while they said the thing they needed to say. The marriage, she said, it would give them the optics they want. A CEO in a partnership with someone who fills in whatever they think I can't do. Fletcher would be on the board. My stepbrother would call that stability. She shook her head. I've met Fletcher twice. He's not unkind. He's the solution to their problem, and I would be the problem being solved. What do you want? Wyatt said. She looked at him like it was a slightly strange question. I want to run my company, she said. I built it. 7 years. The infrastructure division, the renewable energy contracts, the Asia-Pacific expansion, that was all strategy I drove. They would not have those assets without me. Okay. And I'm good at it. I'm not... She stopped. I'm not suffering through it. I'm actually good at it. I believe you. Then you're about the only one, she said, and it came out with more edge than she'd intended, and she looked away again. From the hallway came the sound of Chloe's door opening. She appeared in the kitchen entrance still in her pajama top and jeans, which was her weekend compromise, holding a library book. Are you guys talking about serious stuff? She asked. Yes, Wyatt said. Okay, she said, completely unbothered. I'm going to read in the living room. Sienna, do you want a cookie? We have the chocolate chip ones from Thursday. I'm fine, Sienna said. The cookies are good, Chloe said, in the tone of someone clarifying important information, and went to the living room. Sienna stared after her for a second. Something in her expression had shifted. The edge of it had gone softer, the way it sometimes did when Chloe moved through a room and said something with exactly the right amount of not caring about the weight of whatever the adults were carrying. She's remarkable, Sienna said quietly. She's a lot, Wyatt said. That's not the same thing as remarkable. No, he agreed. It's not. He thought about telling her then, about Maya, about what it had been like in the first year after, about the specific weight of raising a 6-year-old who still checked the front door every night to see if her mother might be there. He thought about it and decided against it, not because it was too personal, but because Sienna was already carrying a full load and adding the weight of his history to it felt like the wrong move. Instead, he said, You don't have to marry him. She blinked, looked at him. It's more complicated than... I know it's complicated. I'm not saying the situation isn't complicated. I'm saying you don't have to marry him. A pause. You make it sound simple, she said. I know it's not simple. I'm saying the core of it is. They want you to trade what you actually want for what makes them comfortable. That part's simple, even if all the parts around it aren't. She was quiet for a moment. Outside the window, someone on the street below was arguing with a delivery guy about a package. The argument lasted about 20 seconds and then was over. How did you... She started, stopped. After your wife, how did you decide what came next? He was quiet for a moment. I didn't really. I just made the next decision, and then the one after that. Some of them were wrong. Most of them were just the thing that was there. The home health work. Yeah. You didn't want that. I did not want it, he said. It was what I knew how to do. And there were people who needed it, and I needed to be doing something, so... She looked at the bookshelf behind him, the medical texts, the military history, the Chloe books crowded in between. You gave up a lot, she said. I chose a lot, he corrected. There's a difference. She looked at him for a moment. He couldn't entirely read what was in her face. He'd gotten better over the years at not needing to. She stayed for lunch that day. Grilled cheese because Chloe had requested it, with the specific authority of someone who'd been promised it twice already. Wyatt made 3 and they ate at the kitchen table again, and Chloe explained the entire plot of the book she'd been reading, which involved a girl, a lighthouse, and a sea creature that may or may not have been real, and Sienna asked 3 genuinely good questions about the lighthouse that made Chloe put down her sandwich to answer them properly. He watched them across the table. He was careful not to make it a thing. He just watched. On the 4th Saturday, she arrived at 10 in the morning with a plastic bag from the grocery store 2 blocks away. I looked up a recipe, she said at the door. He stared at the bag. Strawberry pancakes, she said. Chloe mentioned the diner near the airport. 3 weeks ago, Wyatt said. I remembered. He stepped back to let her in. Do you know how to make pancakes? The recipe has 4 steps. I can follow 4 steps. She could not, as it turned out, follow 4 steps without significant input from Chloe, who appointed herself executive supervisor and took the role seriously. The first batch was slightly burned on one side because the temperature was too high. The second batch was better. The third batch was what pancakes were supposed to be, golden, real strawberry pieces visible in the batter, slightly crispy at the edges. Sienna ate 2 of them standing at the counter, or rather sitting in her chair at counter height, and said nothing, which was the most honest review she could have given. Better than the diner? Chloe asked. Different, Sienna said. Not worse. That means better, Chloe said, and looked at Wyatt with the expression of someone who just won an argument they hadn't known they were having. It was the most domestic morning he'd had in 4 years. He wasn't sure what to do with that, so he just washed the dishes and let it be what it was. What it was this. She kept coming back, and every time she came back, she stayed a little longer. And every time she stayed a little longer, some part of whatever she'd been carrying when she walked in seemed to be slightly lighter when she left. He wasn't the reason for that, or not only the reason. It was Chloe, who treated Sienna not as someone to be careful around, but as someone to be interested in. It was the apartment itself, the particular smallness of it, the crayon marks, and the uneven bookshelves, and the absence of performance that Sienna moved through every single day in every other context of her life. He didn't say any of that to her. He just made sure the elevator worked when she came and that there was coffee when she needed it, and that Chloe didn't ask her anything too sharp about things she hadn't offered. He wasn't good at most things, he'd be the first to say, but he was good at this, at making a space where someone could be exactly as tired or as guarded or as fractured as they actually were without anyone requiring them to be otherwise. The 5th Saturday, she was quieter than usual. She sat at the table while Chloe was at a friend's place for a birthday party, and Wyatt did paperwork at the counter, patient notes, billing, the insurance form he'd been putting off for 2 weeks, and they existed in the same room for 40 minutes without speaking, which somehow wasn't uncomfortable. Eventually, she said, "The board meets next Thursday." He kept writing. "Yeah? They're going to ask me to make a decision about Fletcher." He finished the line he was writing. "What are you going to tell them?" A long pause. "I don't know yet," she said. He looked up. She was looking at the wall of Chloe's drawings, 12 of them taped at child height down the hallway, visible from here. She'd noticed them on the first visit and had never commented on them directly, but he'd seen her look at them every time. "Which one is your favorite?" he said. She blinked, pulled back from whatever she'd been thinking. "What?" He nodded at the drawings. She looked at them again, more deliberately this time. She took her time. He went back to his paperwork and let her take it. "The dragon," she said finally. "Yeah," he said. "Me too." She left at 3, before Chloe got back from the party. On her way out, she paused at the dragon drawing, stopped her chair right in front of it, close enough to see the detail. Chloe had drawn it in red and orange crayon with a lot of yellow at the edges for fire, and it had 3 toes on each foot and approximately 14 teeth, and was either breathing fire or eating a cloud. The interpretation was left to the viewer. Sienna looked at it for a long time. "She's not afraid of anything," she said. "Not about the dragon. She's afraid of plenty of things," Wyatt said. "She's just decided not to let that be the main thing." He wasn't sure, in the moment, whether he was talking about Chloe or something else. He didn't examine it. He just held the door and watched her go, and the elevator opened when she pressed the button, and the afternoon was gray and mild outside and perfectly ordinary, and he went back to his billing forms and didn't think too hard about any of it. That night, after he picked Chloe up and listened to a full account of the birthday party, which had featured a magician who was okay but not as good as she'd hoped, and a cake with green frosting, which she regarded as a suspicious color for frosting. She brushed her teeth and came to the doorway of the kitchen in her pajamas with her hair loose. "Did Sienna come today?" she said. "Yeah, you missed her." "What did you guys talk about?" "Some serious stuff, some not serious stuff." She leaned on the doorframe. "Is she going to be okay?" He considered his answer. "I think so." "But you're not sure." "I'm not sure about most things." Chloe looked at the hallway wall, at her own drawings, 12 of them, all the animals and landscapes and the ambitious dragon with its 14 teeth. "I'm going to draw something new tomorrow," she said. "Yeah? What?" She shrugged in the way she did when she already knew but wasn't ready to say it. "Something," she said, and went to bed. The drawing Chloe made the next morning was small. half a sheet of construction paper, orange crayon, and she taped it at the end of the hallway row without showing it to Wyatt first, which was unusual. He noticed it Monday morning on his way to the kitchen and stopped. It was 3 figures. Rough the way all her figures were rough. The proportions slightly off, the arms too long. A tall one on the left, a small one in the middle, and one in a circle at the bottom right. A circle with 2 lines extending from it that were clearly wheels. She'd left a gap in the middle of the row to put it there, like she'd been saving the space. He stood in the hallway for a moment looking at it. Then he went and made coffee and didn't say anything about it. Sienna called on Wednesday. She'd gotten his number from the cab company record. She told him this directly, no apology, which he respected, and she called at 7:45 in the morning, which told him something about the state of her week. "The board meeting is tomorrow," she said. "You told me." "They moved it up. It was supposed to be Thursday. Now it's tomorrow, which I think is Garrison's doing because he wants less time for me to prepare a response to whatever they're going to put on the table." He was in the kitchen making Chloe's lunch. He tucked the phone between his ear and shoulder. What are they going to put on the table? A proposal, dressed up in board language, but essentially Mary Fletcher Dane, except a co-executive structure that gives him operational authority over 3 divisions, or face a no-confidence motion at the shareholder meeting in April. He stopped cutting the sandwich. "That's not a proposal. That's an ultimatum." "Yes," she said. "That's what I said." "What did Garrison say?" "He said I was being emotional." A pause. "He says that a lot. Anytime I disagree with something he doesn't want to discuss, I'm being emotional." Wyatt set the knife down. "What do you want to do?" "I want to go into that meeting tomorrow and tell them all to go to hell." She said it with enough controlled energy that he knew she'd been sitting on it for days. "I want to put every document I've built over 7 years on that table and remind them that this company exists because I refused to quit 3 times when anyone else would have." "Okay. But I also know that if I do that, they'll call the motion immediately, and I don't have the votes to stop it. And by April, I'll be out anyway, but with less dignity and more lawyers." He thought about what she'd said a few weeks back. "I chose a lot. There's a difference." He thought about how she'd looked at Chloe's drawing of the dragon. He thought about the tired recognition in her face at the airport, and how different it was from how she looked now, even in a difficult phone call. "What would you do?" she asked. She said it carefully, like she'd been deciding whether to ask. He picked the knife back up, finished the sandwich. "I'd figure out what I actually want. Not what I want to prove to them. Not what I want to protect. What I actually want out of the next 10 years. Silence on the line. "And then," he said, "I'd make the decision that gets me there, even if it looked like losing from the outside." Another pause, longer. "That's terrifying advice," she said. "Yeah," he said. "Usually is." She was quiet for a moment. He could hear something in the background, hotel sounds, the low hum of a hallway. "Chloe has school tomorrow?" 8 to 3. "After 3, I might need somewhere to go. After the meeting." "Okay," he said. "I don't know how it's going to go." "Okay." "I'm not—" She stopped. Tried again. "I'm not asking you to fix anything. I just need somewhere that isn't—" "The door's open," he said. "Whenever you need it." She didn't say thank you. She just said, "Okay," in a voice that was working hard to hold itself level, and the call ended. He finished making Chloe's lunch. He packed it in the bag with the blue zipper, the one Chloe had decorated with iron-on patches, a lightning bolt, a bean sprout, a small, imprecise drawing of a dragon that she'd found at a craft store and declared destiny. He set it by the front door. He stood there for a moment in the quiet of the apartment, thinking about a woman in a hotel room 12 blocks away who was about to walk into a room full of people who wanted to reduce her to a problem they could manage, and who was going to have to decide whether the thing she'd built was worth what they were asking her to pay to keep it. He thought, that's not a decision anyone can make for you. He thought, I hope she already knows what she wants. Set. She wasn't there at 3:15 or 3:30. He picked Chloe up, came home, started dinner. Chloe did her homework at the table and periodically looked at the door. At 4:40, the buzzer went. Chloe was up before he could move. I'll get it. Chloe, but she was already at the intercom. Hello? A pause, longer than usual. Then Sienna's voice, and it was different. Not the controlled register, not the managed tone. It was flat in the specific way of someone who'd been talking in a controlled register all day and had finally run out. It's me, she said. Chloe buzzed her up without another word and went back to her homework like she'd simply been waiting for a thing she'd already known was coming. Wyatt opened the door. Sienna came off the elevator and down the hallway, and she looked, not destroyed. He'd expected destroyed, and she wasn't that. She was stripped. The blazer was gone. She was in a white shirt and dark pants, and her hair was half loose in the way it got when she'd been running her hand through it. Her face was the face of someone who'd made a very large decision and hadn't started feeling the shape of it yet. She stopped in the doorway. I resigned, she said. He stepped back. Let her in. It wasn't. She stopped herself from explaining and moved into the living room and stopped there, in the middle of the room, not going to the table, not taking off her jacket because she wasn't wearing one. Just stopped. Do you want to sit? He said. I'm sitting, she said, and then looked at her own chair and almost laughed, a short, broken sound that was partly laugh and partly something else. I mean, obviously. I know what you meant. She moved to the couch-side area where she usually positioned herself across from the armchair. He sat in the armchair. From the kitchen table, Chloe did not look up from her homework, which was the most considerate thing she could have done, and she knew it. Walk me through it, Wyatt said. Sienna was quiet for a second. Then, I went in at 10. Full board, 7 members, Garrison at the head because he'd called the meeting, and that's how he plays it. Fletcher was there, which I hadn't been told. That was the first thing. He was just sitting there at the table like it was already decided, like I was going to walk in and see him and understand that the conversation was already over. What did you do? I sat down and asked him to leave. What did he do? He looked at Garrison. Garrison said Fletcher had been invited as a prospective strategic partner and had every right to be present for a discussion about the company's future direction. She said this in a voice that was a precise imitation of Garrison's measured, reasonable tone. She was good at it, which meant she'd heard it enough times to memorize it. And I said that if Fletcher Dane didn't leave the room, I would leave the room and call my attorney, and this meeting wouldn't happen today. Did he leave? After about 90 seconds of Garrison trying to make me feel like I was being unreasonable, yes, Fletcher left. To his credit, he didn't make a scene. He just picked up his folder and went. Wyatt nodded. Then the meeting started, she said, and it was exactly what I knew it would be. The numbers, the market concerns, the shareholder confidence language, the projections they'd cherry-picked to make the Q3 numbers look worse than they were. Garrison walked me through a 20-minute presentation about why the company needed structural change. She paused. It was a good presentation. He's very good at what he does, which is making the thing he wants sound like the thing that's obviously correct. And your stepbrother? Her jaw tightened. Declan. She said the name the way you said the name of something you'd stopped being surprised by. Declan waited until Garrison finished, and then he said, very calmly, very measured, that he wanted to say something that came from concern for me, not for the company. And he said that the accident had changed me, that I wasn't the same person who'd built this company, that he worried, he actually used the word worried, that I was holding on to the role out of, she stopped, out of identity rather than capability. The apartment was very quiet. From outside, a car passed on the street, and then it was quiet again. He said you couldn't handle it, Wyatt said. He said he wasn't sure I could handle it. There's a difference, legally. He's very careful about legal distinctions. She looked at her hands. And then he said that perhaps the most self-aware thing I could do, for myself, for the company, for everyone, would be to accept the transition they were proposing, with gratitude. Because the company had supported me through the hardest period of my life, and now the company needed something in return. He really said that, Wyatt said, word for word. He sat with that for a moment. He thought about what it would feel like to hear that from a person who shared your blood, the thing dressed up as concern, the knife with the padded handle so you couldn't feel the blade going in. What did you say? Sienna was quiet for a long moment. Outside, a kid on the street was yelling something at another kid, Something about a bike. And then they were both laughing, and then they were gone. I looked at Declan, she said slowly, and I thought about the last 18 months. Every meeting I chaired from a wheelchair while pretending not to notice when people looked at my legs. Every time I chose the chair over the cane because the chair let me function, and the cane made me perform recovery for their comfort. Every trip I rerouted, every entrance I mapped, every moment I spent 3 times the energy of any other person in the room just arriving. She stopped. And I thought about something you said, she continued, about choosing a thing instead of giving something up. And I thought about what I actually want, not what I want to prove, not what I want to protect. What did you decide? I decided I want to stop spending my energy making them comfortable. She said it quietly, without drama. It sounded like someone reading out loud something they'd written down and kept folded in their pocket for a while. I decided the company isn't worth what they're asking me to pay to keep it, not because I can't do it, because doing it the way they need me to do it would require me to become the thing they see when they look at me, a liability with a title, and I'm not that. He didn't say anything. So I resigned, she said. I put a resignation letter on the table. I had it in my bag, which surprised them. I think they'd expected negotiation. And I said I wanted my personal files and my assistant's contact information and that they could manage the transition announcement however they wanted, and I left. Silence. Was Garrison? Wyatt started. He followed me out, Sienna said, into the hallway. He was controlled about it, the way he always is, but there was something under it. I think he genuinely thought I would negotiate, that the letter was a tactic. She paused. He said, "You don't have anything without this company, Sienna. Nothing you've built outside it. Nothing to fall back on." He said it like a fact, not unkindly, just as a fact. "What did you say?" She looked up. Her eyes were dry. She wasn't crying, and hadn't been, which wasn't because she wasn't feeling it, but because she'd moved past the part where it was going to come out that way. I said, "I know," and I left. He waited to see if there was more. There wasn't. "Okay," he said. "Okay," she repeated. "That's it? Okay? What do you want me to say?" She made a small, tired gesture. "I don't know. Something about whether I made the right..." "You already know whether you made the right decision," he said. "You knew before you walked in with that letter. You're not asking me if it was right. You're asking me to help you not feel how heavy it is right now." She looked at him, a long look. "Is that what I'm asking?" she said. "Yeah," he said gently, "and I can't do that. I can just be here while it's heavy." Something shifted in her face. Not relief exactly, something closer to recognition, the specific feeling of being seen without being managed. "It's very heavy," she said. "I know." From the kitchen table, without looking up, Chloe said, "There are cookies." Both of them looked at her. She still hadn't looked up from her homework. "I'm just saying, cookies don't fix things, but they help a little." Sienna looked at Chloe for a long moment. Then she looked at Wyatt, and then she made a sound that was not quite a laugh and not quite a sob, but was somewhere in the exact middle, the involuntary kind, the kind that came up when you'd been holding something tight for a very long time, and someone small and completely sincere offered you a cookie. "Okay," Sienna said. "Yes, I'll have a cookie." Chloe got up and got the cookies. Wyatt made tea because it was that kind of afternoon. They sat in the kitchen, the three of them, and Chloe finished her homework and explained a long division problem that she'd gotten wrong twice and was now getting right. And Sienna, to Wyatt's genuine surprise, walked her through it differently, a shortcut method he'd never heard. And Chloe stared at it for a second and said, "Why doesn't anyone teach it this way?" Which was a legitimate question. It was ordinary, completely, deliberately ordinary. And that was the point. At 6:30, the buzzer went. Then again. Then a third time, long and insistent. Wyatt frowned. He wasn't expecting anyone. His father-in-law was in Phoenix until next week. His patients didn't come to him. He pressed the intercom. "Yeah?" "This is a building emergency, sir. We need..." A voice he didn't recognize, professional, slightly out of breath. He pressed the door release and went to the hallway. The elevator opened and 4 people came out. Two men in suits, one woman with a tablet. One he recognized immediately, Declan Ashford. He was taller than Wyatt had imagined from Sienna's description, and he had the particular kind of good looks that came with money and had curdled slightly with authority, handsome in a way that wanted you to notice it. Behind them, barely keeping up, was Garrison Holt. Wyatt stood in the apartment doorway and did not move. "We're looking for Sienna Ashford," Declan said. Calm, reasonable, the padded handle voice. "This is a private residence," Wyatt said. "Her location service." The woman with the tablet started. "She turned off her location service," Wyatt said. He hadn't known that for a fact 30 seconds ago, but he did now because Sienna had appeared behind him in the hallway, and she was very still and her hands were on the push rims of her chair but not moving. Declan saw her. Something moved across his face. Not relief, exactly. More like the satisfaction of a problem located. Sienna. He said it like she was a package he'd been tracking. "Do you have any idea what you've done to the stock price?" "It's after market hours," she said. "The announcement leaked before close." "I didn't leak anything." "Someone did." He looked at Wyatt, then back at Sienna. "Can we speak privately?" "We're speaking now," she said. Declan looked at Wyatt again. Longer this time, measuring. "Who is this?" "His name is Wyatt Mercer," Sienna said. "And if you have something to say to me, you can say it here." Garrison stepped forward then, and his voice had the quality of something being very deliberately kept under pressure. "Sienna, the resignation letter isn't binding until the board formally accepts it. There's still time to—" "I know it's not binding," she said. "I had my attorney review the bylaws." Garrison paused. "Then you know there's a window." "I know. And you know that if you walk away without a transition plan, you're exposing yourself to—" "I know what I'm exposing myself to," she said. "I made the list." Declan's patience, which had been performing itself very carefully, slipped slightly. "This is not— Sienna, you are not thinking clearly. You've been coming to this—" He looked at the apartment, at the unmatched furniture and the crayon mark on the table and the 12 drawings on the hallway wall. "This place for weeks, apparently, and whoever this man is, he has clearly—" "Finish that sentence," Wyatt said. Declan looked at him. "Finish it," Wyatt said again, with the same level voice, the one that had no edge in it because it didn't need one. Declan didn't finish it. "She's an adult," Wyatt said. "She made a decision. You don't have to like it. You don't get to overrule it." "I'm her family," Declan said. "I know what family is," Wyatt said, "and I know what that isn't." The hallway was very quiet. Chloe had come to the kitchen doorway. Wyatt could see her at the edge of his vision, standing still, watching with the focused calm she'd developed from years of being around adults in difficult situations. Garrison tried a different approach, softer, the concerned colleague register. "Sienna, think about what you've built. 7 years. You said it yourself in the meeting. 3 divisions, the Asia-Pacific contracts, the renewable portfolio. Is all of that worth walking away from over—" "It's not walking away," she said. Her voice was even. "You've had that backwards since the beginning. You're asking me to walk away from something. I'm choosing not to." "What are you choosing?" Declan asked. There was something genuine in the question, which surprised Wyatt. Not empathy, but actual confusion, like he could not follow the logic. Sienna looked at her stepbrother for a long moment. "I'm choosing not to spend the next decade making you comfortable," she said. "That's all. It's a very simple decision. It took me a long time to make it because I kept thinking it had to be more complicated than that." Declan stared at her. The woman with the tablet had stopped moving her thumbs. Garrison had gone very still, in the way of someone recalculating. "You'll have nothing," Declan said. Not cruel. That was what was strange about it. He said it like a concern, like he meant it. "I'll have less," she said. "That's different." A long silence. Declan looked at Wyatt one more time. "If something goes wrong—" "Nothing's going to go wrong," Wyatt said. "You don't know that." "No," Wyatt said, "but neither do you. And you've been treating the possibility of it going wrong as a reason to control her for 1.5 years. At some point, that stops being concern." Declan looked like he wanted to say something else. He didn't. He looked at Sienna one last time, something complicated moving through his face, and then he turned and pressed the elevator button, and Garrison and the two others followed, and the elevator opened and took them. The hallway was quiet. Chloe came all the way out of the kitchen. She looked at Sienna, then at Wyatt, then down the hall at the elevator. "Are they coming back?" she asked. "Maybe," Wyatt said. "But not tonight," Chloe said. "Not tonight," Sienna said. Her voice was different now. The controlled register was gone entirely. What was left was something raw, and also somehow less exhausted, like a window that had been painted shut for a long time and had just been opened for the first time. "Okay," Chloe said. She went back to the kitchen. Then, from the kitchen, "Dad, can she stay for dinner? I think she should stay for dinner." Wyatt looked at Sienna. Sienna was looking at the hallway wall, at the 12 drawings, at the small orange one at the end. 3 figures, a tall one, a small one in a circle with 2 wheels. She didn't say anything for a moment. Then, "I think I should stay for dinner." "Okay," he said. He went to the kitchen. He started pulling things out. He could hear Sienna moving into the living room, and then Chloe's voice, lower than usual, saying something he couldn't quite catch, and then a quiet response. He didn't try to hear it. Some things were meant for the room they happened in. He started cooking, and the apartment smelled like garlic and onion and old wood and rain coming through the window. He'd left cracked, and it was ordinary and imperfect and exactly, precisely what it was supposed to be. The hotel suite was gone by the end of the week. Sienna had been paying for it month to month, a temporary arrangement that had stretched to 14 months because leaving it would have required deciding where to go instead, and deciding where to go required deciding what came next. And that was the question she'd been unable to answer until she'd walked out of a board meeting and left a resignation letter on a table. She called the hotel Thursday morning, gave 36 hours notice, and by Friday afternoon she was in a smaller apartment 6 blocks from Wyatt's building, a ground floor unit she'd found through an agency, bare walls and a functional bathroom, and a kitchen that got afternoon light. Packing boxes she'd had delivered and figuring out which of 14 months of accumulated hotel living actually mattered enough to keep. The answer was, not very much. She told Wyatt about the move on Saturday when she came over, which by now was so established a pattern that Chloe had started leaving the chain off the door on weekend mornings without being asked. "Ground floor, what?" he said. "Yes." "Accessible building?" "I checked. Proper ramp, wide doorways, lever handles." She paused. "I know what to look for." "I know you do." He wasn't checking up on her. He was just noting it, the same way he noted all the small logistics of other people's lives without making a production of it. "The kitchen is small," she said. "But I can work in it." Chloe looked up from her breakfast. "Can you cook?" "I made pancakes." "With my help." "With significant help," Sienna agreed. "But I've been watching." Chloe considered this. "You should practice eggs. My dad says eggs are the foundation." "Your dad says a lot of things." "Most of them are pretty good," Chloe said, which was the same thing she'd said the first day. And Sienna caught Wyatt's eye across the table, and something passed between them. Not a significant thing, just the small recognition of a moment looping back on itself, the kind you only noticed if you'd been paying attention the whole time. The nonprofit came 3 weeks later. A woman named Carol Dempsey ran it. She'd been running it for 11 years from an office above a dry cleaner on Halsted Street, which was not a glamorous address but was, as Carol put it when Sienna called, extremely functional and close to the women they served. The organization was called Open Ground, and what it did, specifically, was provide legal advocacy, housing support, and employment resources to women who were navigating abuse situations, discrimination claims, or disability-related workplace barriers. Sienna had found them through a contact of a contact following a thread she'd started pulling the week after she resigned, a thread that began with the question, "What do I know how to do that isn't running a company?" The answer, when she sat with it honestly, was, "I know how to build something from nothing. I know how to make a case. I know how to walk into a room where people don't want to give me what I'm asking for and not leave until they do." She called Carol on a Tuesday. Carol called her back in 4 minutes. "I know who you are," Carol said. I also know you just walked away from a 9-figure salary, so either you've lost your mind or you found it. Tell me which. I'm going to say found, Sienna said. Good answer. Come in Thursday. Don't wear the blazer. Sienna looked down at what she was wearing. She was wearing the blazer. How do you know about the blazer? Honey, you were on financial news for 2 years. You always wear the blazer. She did not wear the blazer Thursday. She wore it the second Thursday because she forgot. And Carol looked at it and said nothing, which was somehow worse. By the third week, she'd stopped thinking about it. What she did at open ground at first was listen. Carol had told her that explicitly. You are not going to come in here and restructure anything for at least 60 days. You are going to sit in intake interviews, sit in legal aid sessions, sit in the employment workshops, and you are going to understand what these women are actually up against before you open your mouth about strategy. Sienna had started to object, and Carol had said, That's the job, yes or no? She said yes. So she listened. She sat in rooms with women who had been told, in various official and unofficial ways, that they were too damaged or too dependent or too difficult or too broken to deserve the thing they were asking for. She recognized the language, not the specific words, but the architecture of it, the way systems found polished, reasonable ways to tell people that their limitations were the problem, not the systems themselves. She started talking in the 4th week. Not about strategy, not yet. Just to the women, one-on-one, after the formal sessions ended. Practical things, mostly. How to document a workplace accommodation request in a way that created a paper trail. How to read a settlement offer. How to know when an attorney was giving you real advice and when they were managing your expectations down because they didn't think you could handle the real picture. Carol watched this from the doorway one afternoon without announcing herself. You've done this before, Carol said, after the woman Sienna had been talking to had left. Not exactly this, Sienna said, but you know what it looks like when an institution is telling someone no without actually saying no. Yes, Sienna said, I know what that looks like. Carol looked at her for a moment. You want to tell me why you actually left the company? I told you why. You told me the board story. I'm asking why you left. Sienna was quiet for a second. Because I got tired of spending all my energy making powerful men comfortable with my existence. Carol nodded slowly. How long did that take you to figure out? 18 months, give or take. That's actually fast, Carol said, and went back to her office. She was telling Wyatt about Carol on a Wednesday evening. She'd started coming over on weekdays sometimes, not just Saturdays, an organic shift that none of them had formally acknowledged. When Chloe came in from her room with a small clay pot in both hands, moving with the focused caution of someone transporting something fragile. I started one for you, Chloe said, and set it on the coffee table in front of Sienna. Sienna looked at it. It was a small terracotta pot, maybe 4 inches across, with a bean seedling in it, 1 inch high, 2 small leaves unfurling. The pot had Sienna's name written on the side in blue marker in Chloe's handwriting. From your experiment? Sienna said. Soil B, Chloe said. The winner. I have enough seeds. She'd said this last part as if preempting any objection about resources. You can keep it on your windowsill. It needs water twice a week, not more. If you water it too much, it drowns. Sienna looked at the seedling for a long moment. I've never kept a plant alive, she said. That's because you were in a hotel, Chloe said, with the matter-of-fact certainty she brought to things she'd already reasoned through. Hotels aren't good for plants. Your new apartment has a window. It does, Sienna said. Then it'll be fine. Wyatt was watching from the kitchen doorway. He said nothing. He just watched his daughter hand a small clay pot to a woman who'd spent 14 months in a hotel and 3 weeks learning to listen. And something in his chest did the thing it did sometimes, that he'd gotten better at not examining too closely. He went back to the stove. The balcony was Chloe's idea. Wyatt's apartment had a narrow balcony off the living room, 6 feet wide, barely enough for 2 chairs and a railing, the kind that came standard with the building and that he'd used mostly as storage for things he didn't use often enough to keep inside. In late March, Chloe informed him that they were going to use it for a garden. We, he said, me, you, and Sienna. It can be a project. Sienna has her own apartment. She's here half the time anyway, Chloe said, which was a measurement that was close enough to accurate that he couldn't argue with it without lying. The weekend they cleared the balcony, Sienna arrived at 9 in the morning with 2 bags from the hardware store and a bag from the garden center and a level of research preparation that Wyatt could only describe as executive level, which he said, and she said, "I know what my strengths are," without a trace of irony. They built 4 planter boxes over the course of the morning. Wyatt did the construction because he had the tools and the spatial reasoning for it. Sienna managed the soil and the planting because she'd apparently spent 2 weeks researching companion planting and was not going to waste that. Chloe moved between both tasks, offering opinions and occasionally being genuinely helpful. It was not efficient. The first box took 2 hours because the measurements were off and they had to redo one side. There was a disagreement about drainage holes. Sienna wanted 6, Wyatt thought 4 was fine. Chloe cast the deciding vote at 5. Which satisfied no one and worked perfectly. Soil went on the balcony floor, and neither of them had brought newspaper to put down first, so they spent 20 minutes with paper towels afterward. At one point, Sienna's chair got a wheel caught on the lip of the balcony door. She backed up, angled differently, got through. Wyatt had started to move toward her and stopped himself when she'd already handled it. She noticed him stopping himself and didn't say anything about it, which was the right call for both of them. By noon, they had 4 planter boxes, dirty hands, and a disagreement about what to put in the 4th one. "Herbs," Wyatt said. "Practical." "Flowers," Chloe said. "It's a garden." They both looked at Sienna. "Herbs on one end, flowers on the other," she said. "Split the box." "That was going to be my answer," Chloe said. "I know," Sienna said. "That's why I said it." Chloe grinned in a way she didn't try to hide, which she also did sometimes around Sienna. Let things show without deciding first whether to. Wyatt had noticed that too. He noticed a lot of things and kept most of them in the part of himself he'd gotten good at keeping quiet. That part was getting louder lately. Not about anything specific, or maybe about everything specific. About the way Sienna sat in the kitchen now without needing to be invited. About the way she and Chloe had developed their own rhythms that he wasn't part of and didn't need to be part of. About the way the apartment felt different on the days she wasn't there, which was not an emptiness exactly, but a particular kind of quiet that he'd learned to tell apart from other kinds of quiet. He'd felt this before, or something adjacent to it, with Maya. Though Maya had come into his life in a different way, with different physics, and he'd been 22 and had no reference points for any of it. He had reference points now. That was the problem, and also the thing that kept him from saying anything. He had enough reference points to know exactly how much was at risk. What he did instead of saying anything was show up. He drove her to open ground twice a week when her car was in for repairs and didn't mention it after. He came over to her apartment on a Saturday when she was struggling with a flat-pack bookshelf that had turned out to be genuinely, objectively designed wrong, and spent 90 minutes with a screwdriver figuring out what the instructions had gotten backwards. He read the grant proposal she'd been drafted for Open Ground's disability advocacy expansion at 11 at night because she'd texted asking if he had time, and he'd said yes because he did. He read it twice. He made notes on his phone. He called her. "The 3rd section," he said when she picked up. "You're being too diplomatic." "It's a grant proposal," she said. "You have to be diplomatic. You have to be persuasive. Those aren't the same thing." He looked at his notes. "You're describing the problem in the passive voice. Women with disabilities face barriers. Who's creating the barriers? Name it. Make the funder uncomfortable in the right places." Silence on the line. "That's actually good," she said. "I know," he said. "You don't have to sound smug about it." "I'm not smug. I'm tired. It's 11. "Then why did you call?" "Because you asked me to read it." Another silence, different from the first one. "Wyatt," she said. "Yeah." "Nothing," she said. "Never mind, get some sleep." "You too," he said, and they hung up, and he sat in the kitchen for a moment with the phone face down on the table and didn't examine anything. The PT sessions had started a month after she moved into her apartment. She'd been doing outpatient therapy since the accident. She told him this matter-of-factly, not as a disclosure but as context. But she'd taken a 4-month gap during the worst of the board situation and was starting up again with a new therapist at a clinic 3 miles from her place. The new therapist was named Riva, and Sienna described her as extremely competent and personally irritating, which Wyatt interpreted as meaning she pushed Sienna in the direction Sienna needed pushing. She didn't talk about the sessions much, but he noticed the change in how she moved. Not progress in the dramatic sense. It wasn't that kind of thing. She'd been clear with him early that the paralysis wasn't going to reverse, that this was about function and pain management and not giving ground she didn't have to give. But there was something in the way she managed the chair in the apartment now that was less effortful, more automatic. Like she'd stopped spending energy on the fact of it and had more left for everything else. One afternoon in April, she was on the balcony watering the planter boxes. She'd taken over the watering schedule with a precision that suggested she'd built a spreadsheet, which he suspected she had. And Chloe was at the table inside doing homework, and Wyatt was standing in the doorway because the afternoon was mild and the balcony was in the sun, and he had a cup of coffee and no particular urgency for the next hour. "The rosemary's doing well," Sienna said. "Chloe talks to it." Sienna paused in her watering. "She talks to the rosemary. She talks to all of them. She says it helps." "Does it?" "The rosemary is doing well," he said. She made a small sound that was almost a laugh and went back to the watering can. He watched her. He did that sometimes when she wasn't looking, not in any way he was proud of, not in any way he'd want to have to explain. Just watch the person in front of him, the actual specific person. The way she tilted the watering can at exactly the right angle to hit the soil and miss the seedlings. The way she'd roll her shoulders slightly when she'd been sitting in one position too long. The way she looked different now than she had at the airport 6 months ago. Not better, not more healed, just more like herself, whatever that was. "Can I ask you something?" he said. She set the watering can on the railing. "You can ask." "Are you happy?" He'd meant it to come out more contextualized than that. It came out simple, maybe too simple. She looked at him. She turned it over. He could see her doing it, not being evasive but being honest, which for her meant she wasn't going to say a thing that wasn't true. "I don't know if happy is the right word," she said. "What's the right word?" She thought about it for another second. "Present," she said. "I'm present. I don't think I've been present in a very long time." He nodded. "Is that enough?" she said. There was something genuine in the question. She wasn't being rhetorical. "Yeah," he said. "That's actually a lot." She picked up the watering can again. He stayed in the doorway. From inside Chloe's voice, "Dad, can you help me with this word problem? It's ridiculous." "What makes it ridiculous?" "There are 2 trains and I don't understand why they both need to be going at different speeds. Why can't they just go the same speed?" "That's a great question," Sienna said without turning around. "It would be more efficient." "Right?" Chloe said, and the conversation moved inside and Wyatt followed it, and the balcony held the sun for another hour, the rosemary and the flowers and the bean plants growing steadily in their divided boxes, indifferent to anything except the light. He told her about Maya that night. He hadn't planned to. They were doing dishes. Sienna had made dinner for the first time in the apartment, a pasta dish she'd been testing at her place, which was better than she'd described it and worse than she seemed to want it to be. And Chloe was already in bed, and they were in the kitchen with the water running, and it just came out the way things came out when you'd been holding them long enough. "She would have liked you," he said. Sienna's hand stilled on the dish she was drying. He kept going, not because it was easy, but because he'd learned that the way through something was usually the same as the way into it. He told her about Maya, not the death, not the clinical facts of it, but Maya herself. The way she'd been impatient with inefficiency and deeply patient with people. The way she'd laughed too loud in movie theaters and never apologized for it. The way she'd been a better parent instinctively in the first weeks of Chloe's life than he'd managed to be after years of deliberate effort. The way the apartment had felt after, not empty, because Chloe was there, but like a sentence with a word missing that you kept reading and kept not being able to finish. Sienna listened. She didn't offer anything, didn't fill the pauses. She just listened the way she'd learned to listen at open ground, or maybe the way she'd always been able to listen and had stopped performing over. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. "She sounds like someone who knew exactly what she wanted," she said. "Yeah," he said. "She was better at that than me." "You're not bad at it," Sienna said. "I'm slow." Slow isn't bad. She set the dish in the rack. Slow means you mean it. He looked at her. She was looking at the dish rack, not at him. Her jaw was set in the particular way it got when she was saying something that cost her something. I'm not good at this, she said. Whatever this is, I'm not good at... She paused. I spent 10 years putting everything into the company because that was the only place I knew how to be fully present. And then the accident, and then the board, and then all of it. She stopped, tried a different angle. I don't have a lot of experience with things that don't have a clear objective. This doesn't need an objective, he said. I know. She finally looked at him. That's what scares me. The kitchen was small and they were close to each other and the water had been off for a while and it was quiet. I'm not going anywhere, he said. It was the simplest thing he could say and the truest. Whatever pace. Whatever this is. She held his gaze. Something moved through her face that wasn't quite any single emotion, but was several of them overlapping in the way real feelings overlapped, unprocessed, alive. Okay, she said finally. Okay? She handed him the last dish to put away, and he put it away, and they turned off the kitchen light, and she got her jacket, and he walked her to the elevator the way he always did, and she pressed the button and the elevator came. The rosemary's going to need trimming soon, she said. I'll tell Chloe. She'll take it seriously. She takes everything seriously. Yeah, he said, she really does. The elevator opened. She went in. She turned around. Wyatt. Yeah. She opened her mouth and then closed it and then looked at the elevator panel and then back at him. The pasta was better, she said. Right? It was better than last time. It was better than last time, he said. Okay, she said, and the doors closed, and he stood there in the hallway for a moment with his hands in his pockets and the small, particular feeling of something that was growing in the careful direction of something real, the kind that was fragile not because it was weak, but because it mattered, which was the only way anything that mattered ever felt. He went back in. He checked on Chloe, asleep, one arm out of the covers, one of her chapter books open on the bed beside her, which was a habit he'd given up fighting. He took the book, marked the page, set it on the nightstand. He stood in the hallway for a moment. 14 drawings on the wall. He counted without meaning to. The dragon at the end. The 3 figures in the orange construction paper. The tall one and the small one and the one in the circle with 2 wheels. The space she'd saved in the middle of the row, like she'd known it belonged there. He went to bed. He didn't sleep right away. He lay in the dark and listened to the building's sounds. The pipes. The wind off the street. The specific quiet of an apartment where a child was sleeping, and he thought about presence and pace and the difference between choosing something and giving something up. He thought he was starting to understand the difference, finally. It had only taken him 4 years. The rosemary needed trimming in early May, and Chloe took it seriously, exactly as predicted. She stood on the balcony with the small kitchen scissors Wyatt had designated for garden use and approached the task with the focused gravity of a surgeon, consulting the notes she'd written in the back of her bean experiment journal about which stems to cut and at what angle to encourage lateral growth. She'd looked this up. She'd written it down. She was 8 years old and she had a system for everything, which was something she'd gotten from her father and refined considerably on her own. Sienna watched from the doorway, coffee in hand, still in her jacket because it was a cool morning and the balcony faced east and the sun hadn't fully cleared the building across the street yet. She watched Chloe work with the expression she wore sometimes when she thought no one was paying attention. Unguarded. The careful blankness completely gone. Something almost wondering in its place. Wyatt was inside doing dishes. You're holding them too long, Sienna said. Chloe paused. The scissors? After each cut, you hesitate, make the cut, move on. The plant doesn't need you to feel bad about it. Chloe looked at the rosemary, then at Sienna. Then she made the next cut without pausing and moved to the next stem. Better, Sienna said. How do you know about pruning? I've been reading. You read about everything, Chloe said. Yes. My dad does that too. Chloe made another cut, clean and quick. He read 4 books about braiding before he figured out my hair. Sienna looked at the back of Chloe's head. Her braids were even now, had been for months. The left one as smooth as the right. Did the books help? He says yes. I think he just practiced until he got it. Maybe both, Sienna said. Chloe finished the last stem and stepped back to assess. She tilted her head the way Wyatt tilted his head when he was measuring something. Good? Very good, Sienna said. Chloe put the scissors down on the railing and came to stand beside Sienna in the doorway, looking out at the 4 planter boxes. The herbs on one end of the divided box, the flowers on the other, the bean plants in their dedicated box. The tomato seedlings they'd added 3 weeks ago at Chloe's insistence after a library book made a persuasive case. It's actually a garden now, Chloe said. She said it with quiet satisfaction, not performance. It is, Sienna said. It wasn't before. Before it was just a balcony with boxes. She considered this distinction. Now it's a garden. Sienna looked at the planter boxes, at the herbs and the early flowers and the bean plants that had outgrown the construction paper pots and found their way to proper soil. She thought about the small clay pot on her own windowsill, the one Chloe had brought her 6 weeks ago, which had grown past the seedling stage and had 6 leaves now and was stubbornly, persistently alive despite Sienna's documented history with plants. Yeah, Sienna said. Now it's a garden. From inside, Wyatt appeared in the doorway behind them. He was holding a dish towel that he'd clearly forgotten he was holding. He took in the balcony, the trimmed rosemary, Chloe's satisfied expression, the two of them side by side in the morning light. And he did what he always did, which was take it in without making it into anything. Just let it be there. Done? He said. Done, Chloe confirmed. Pancakes? Chloe turned away from the balcony with the particular speed she reserved for 2 subjects, interesting books and food. Strawberry? We have strawberries. Then yes. She was already inside. Sienna can supervise. She's good at it. I'm aware, Wyatt said, and looked at Sienna, and there it was again, that thing that had been between them since the kitchen conversation in April, the one where she'd said the word scared, and he'd said whatever pace, and neither of them had pushed further. The thing that was patient and alive and not yet named, which was its own kind of courage. I'll supervise, she said. That's what I was afraid of, he said, and held the door open, and she went inside. It was a Saturday in May. There was nothing dramatic scheduled, and that, it turned out, was its own kind of milestone. The thing Sienna found out about Wyatt, the thing she hadn't known, the thing that shifted something in her understanding of him, came not from Wyatt himself, but from a man named Dennis Calabrese, who worked in cargo logistics at Hargrove International and had been one of Open Ground's pro bono legal aid clients for his daughter's workplace discrimination case. She'd met Dennis in the intake process, spent 3 sessions helping his daughter, a 26-year-old named Priya, who'd been denied a promotion she'd demonstrably earned, build her documentation case. The case had settled favorably the week before. Dennis had come in to say thank you, which not everyone did, and he'd seen Sienna's name on the door placard. She'd been given a proper door and a placard in March, which Carol had announced with exactly 0 ceremony, just slid the placard across the desk and said, "Don't put the blazer on the back of the chair. It looks like you're waiting to leave." And he'd stopped. "Mercer," he said. "Wyatt Mercer. You know him?" She'd looked up from her desk. "Yes." "Why?" Dennis had looked at the placard and then at her and done the brief calculation. "He doesn't talk about it. He's private about it. But my brother-in-law was on that flight 7 years ago. Flight 1184, the Verano Airlines incident. Engine failure over the Midwest. They made an emergency landing at a regional airstrip with no foam on the ground." He paused. 31 people needed medical attention. 6 critical. Your guy was a passenger, not crew, not positioned. Just a passenger who happened to have his field kit on him, because apparently he always carries a field kit, and he triaged all 6 critical cases before the paramedics could get to the airstrip. 2 of them would have died without the intervention. The NTSB report says so, specifically. Sienna was very still. "He was 25, Dennis said. Still active duty, on leave. He refused any official recognition. Wouldn't give his name to the press. My brother-in-law spent 2 years trying to find out who the guy was." He looked at the placard again. "Small world." She didn't tell Wyatt she knew. Not that day, not that week. She sat with it the way she sat with things that needed to settle before she figured out what to do with them. She understood something about why he hadn't told anyone. It wasn't false modesty. False modesty was its own kind of performance, and why it didn't perform. It was simpler than that. To him, it was just the thing that was there to do. And he'd done it. And the recognition afterward had nothing to do with the moment itself. The moment had been 31 scared people and 6 people who needed help staying alive, and he'd helped them stay alive. And everything after that was other people's story about him and not his story about himself. She thought about the airport terminal, about the 40 people with their phones out, about the way he'd just walked across the floor and crouched down and said, "Tell me where to put my hands." No audience required, no calculation, just the thing that needed doing, done. She understood him better after Dennis told her that story. Or rather, she understood that she'd already been understanding him correctly, and this was just the proof she hadn't needed. She told him on a Sunday evening in late May, 6 weeks after Dennis's visit, when they were on the balcony after dinner, Chloe inside finishing the last chapter of the Lighthouse book, the city doing its ambient evening thing below them, traffic and voices, and the specific warm-cool mix of a spring night that hadn't decided yet between the two. She told him about Dennis, about Priya's case, about the conversation. She said it plainly, no preamble, no softening. He didn't say anything for a moment after she finished. "He shouldn't have told you that," he said finally. He was grateful. He didn't know the parameters. "There aren't parameters, it's just—" He stopped, looked out at the street. "It's not something I talk about." "I know." She waited. "Why?" He was quiet for long enough that she thought he wasn't going to answer. Then, "Because the story that people tell about it is always the wrong story. The story is always about the hero and the rescue and the dramatic moment. But what I remember is—" He paused again. "I remember being scared. I remember my hands shaking when I put the tourniquet on the first guy. I remember not knowing if I was going to be fast enough." He looked at his hands. "It wasn't heroic, it was just terrifying, and I did it anyway because there was nobody else." "That's the definition of heroic," she said. "It's the definition of showing up," he said. "Those aren't the same thing." She looked at him. He was looking at his own hands, the particular look of someone who'd replayed something so many times it had worn smooth. "Wyatt," she said. "Yeah, you've been telling me for months that the core of something is simple, even when all the parts around it aren't." She paused. "You were on a plane. 6 people were dying. You were scared, and you helped them anyway. That's the core. The rest is what people add to it afterward." She held his gaze. "You're allowed to let that be what it was." He looked at her for a moment. Something in his face moved. Not sentiment, not the performed emotion of someone being told something flattering, something older and quieter. The thing that moved in a person when they'd been carrying something for a long time and someone said exactly the right true thing about it. "You've been talking to Carol?" he said. "Carol talks to everyone," she said. "She's very efficient about it." He made the sound that was almost a laugh, and she made it with him, and the evening went on. Asa. The question of what they were to each other got answered not in a single conversation, but in the accumulated weight of 100 ordinary moments, that each asked a version of it and got a version of an answer, and gradually the answers added up to something they both understood without requiring a formal declaration. It was in the way he started keeping her specific brand of tea in the cabinet because she came over enough that it made sense. It was in the way she had a key to his apartment because Chloe had asked for a sleepover at her friend's place on a Saturday, and Wyatt needed someone to water the balcony plants while he was at pickup, and she'd just kept the key after. It was in the way she called him at 10 at night about work things, and they'd end up talking for an hour about things that had nothing to do with work. It was in the way he had started showing up at her apartment sometimes on Wednesday evenings with dinner from the Thai place on the corner because it was on his way, and she often forgot to eat when she was deep in a grant cycle. It was in the way Chloe stopped explaining who Sienna was to people and started just saying her name, assuming everyone understood, which they did, because children understood the architecture of their own lives with a clarity that adults spent decades trying to recover. The actual conversation, the explicit one, the one that named the thing, happened in June on a Wednesday night, at her apartment, after the Thai food, sitting on her couch with the window open and the city doing its summer version of itself outside. She said, I need to tell you something. He looked at her. I'm not good at this, she said. I said that before, in your kitchen. I remember. I meant it. I'm not good at the soft parts, the parts that don't have deliverables. She looked at her hands. I run things well. I can build things. I know how to hold a difficult conversation with 20 hostile people in a boardroom. But this, she gestured between them in a way that was slightly awkward and very honest. This, I don't have a system for. I know, he said. That doesn't bother you? No. Why not? He thought about how to say it. He was a man who chose words carefully, not because he was overly precise, but because he'd learned that the difference between the right word and the almost right word was sometimes the difference between a person feeling seen and a person feeling managed. Because I don't need you to have a system for it, he said. I need you to be here, the way you already are. She looked at him. Her jaw was set the way it got when she was saying something that cost her something. I'm here, she said. I want to be here. A pause. I want, whatever this is, I want it to be real. Not a thing that happens around the edges of everything else. Actually real. Okay, he said. That's it? Okay? Yeah, he said, that's it. She stared at him for a second. You're the most infuriating person. I've been told. You never... She made a sound that was half frustration and half something else. You never have the dramatic response. You never... Sienna, he said quietly. What? I've been here, he said. This whole time, you know that. She did know that. She'd known it since the airport, if she was being precise about it, the way she was precise about things when she allowed herself to be. She'd known it in the way you knew things before you were ready to know them, carrying the knowledge around, letting it be there without acting on it, until the moment when not acting on it became its own kind of decision. I know, she said. He reached over and took her hand. Not dramatically, just picked it up the way you picked up something that belonged there, held it like it was a simple and obvious thing, which it was. They sat like that for a while, with the window open and the city outside, and the small clay pot on her windowsill with its 6 stubborn leaves, and it wasn't a perfect moment. Her shoulder ached the way it did in humidity. He'd had a difficult patient that afternoon and hadn't fully shaken it yet. The city was noisy and the couch had a spring that was slightly off on the left side, and life was not a film, and none of it was choreographed. It was just real, which was the only kind of thing that lasted. Meh. Chloe presented the drawing on a Saturday morning in late June, 3 weeks after that. She came out of her room at 9 carrying a piece of paper in both hands, white, not construction paper, the good kind she used when something mattered, and she set it on the kitchen table where Wyatt was eating cereal and Sienna was on her second coffee, and both of them looked at it. It was bigger than her usual drawings. She'd taken her time with it, which you could tell from the detail. The proportions were better than they'd been before. She'd clearly been working on people, and the background had actual elements. Flowers at the bottom, something that was recognizably the balcony at the top left. A sky that had both sun and a few clouds. The clouds drawn in the slightly imprecise way of clouds that actually looked like clouds rather than the generic loop circles kids drew. 3 people stood in the center. A tall figure that was obviously Wyatt. She'd given him his flannel shirt and the slightly crooked posture he had when he was relaxed, the detail of which made Sienna's chest tighten unexpectedly. A small figure beside him that was Chloe herself, braids even, one hand raised like she was pointing at something interesting. And on the other side, in the center of the 3, a figure in a wheelchair, but not diminished by it, not smaller than the others, positioned in the middle like the composition's anchor, one arm raised to match Chloe's like they were both pointing at the same thing. At the bottom, in Chloe's careful print, the title, My Family. Nobody said anything for a moment. Chloe looked at both of them. She was trying not to look anxious about their response, which meant she was anxious about their response. The flowers at the bottom are from the balcony, she said. The rosemary is the one on the right. I wasn't sure if I drew it right. You drew it right, Sienna said. Her voice was level, just barely. I practiced the faces, Chloe said. Faces are hard. Yours... She pointed at the Sienna figure. I had to redo twice because I couldn't get the shape right. Dad's was easier because he barely moves his face, so there's less to remember. That's accurate, Sienna said. I know, Chloe said. She looked at the drawing, then at them. Is it okay? I can put it with the others, or where do you want to put it? Wyatt said. Chloe thought about this with genuine consideration. In the middle of the wall, she said, where there's a gap between the dragon and the landscape one from last year. Okay, Wyatt said. Okay, Sienna said. Chloe picked up the drawing, went to the hallway, and taped it carefully to the wall in the gap she'd left there. The same gap she'd left for the orange construction paper drawing months ago. The gap that now made sense as part of a larger intention she'd had from the beginning. She stood back and looked at it. She adjusted one corner. She looked at it again. Good, she said to herself, and went back to her room. Wyatt and Sienna sat in the kitchen. Through the hallway doorway, from this angle you could see the drawing on the wall. 3 figures, flowers, balcony, even braids. A wheelchair in the center of the composition, because that's where the person in it belonged. She planned that, Sienna said. She plans everything, Wyatt said. The gap in the wall, she left it months ago. I know. Sienna looked at the drawing for a long moment. There was something happening in her face that she wasn't composing, that she'd stopped trying to compose somewhere around the 3rd Saturday. She'd walked into this apartment and eaten cereal at this table and been spoken to by an 8-year-old girl as if her presence required no justification, and her limitations required no comment, and her worth was simply not a question. I used to think, she said slowly, that the accident took something from me. That's how I understood it for the first year, as a subtraction. She paused. And then I thought, for a while, that the resignation was a subtraction too, that I was losing things. She looked at the wall. But I was going in the wrong direction. Wyatt waited. Everything that happened, the accident, the board, the hotel, all of it, it removed things. But the things it removed weren't the important things. I just thought they were because I'd spent so long building them. She turned to look at him. What's actually important was what was left after, or what I found after. She paused. What found me? He looked at her. I'm not good at saying things like this, she said. You're doing fine, he said. I mean what I'm saying. I know you do. He held her gaze. That's why it's fine. She looked at the hallway again, at the drawing in the gap on the wall. At the dragon at the end of the row, 14 teeth, fire or cloud, Chloe's greatest work. She called me family, Sienna said. Not broken about it, just saying it out loud for the first time, giving it air, letting it be the actual size it was. She's right, Wyatt said. Sienna breathed. One slow breath. Not the kind you did for composure. The kind you did when something large had settled into its real shape and your body needed a moment to accommodate it. Yeah, she said. She's right. Tim. There are things people say about love that are almost right but miss the most important part. They say it's a feeling, which it sometimes is. They say it's a choice, which it sometimes is. They say it hits you all at once, or it builds slowly, or it changes you, or it completes you, and some of those are true some of the time, and none of them is the whole truth. What nobody says enough, or says in a way that actually lands, is this. Love is mostly just showing up. It's the everyday decision to be present in someone's life when you don't have to be, when nothing is requiring you to, when it would be just as easy to stay where you are. It's a man crossing an airport floor toward a woman on the ground while 50 other people stand still. It's an 8-year-old girl setting a place at the table before anyone's been invited. It's the space left in a row of drawings, a gap held open for someone who hasn't arrived yet. It doesn't require a grand gesture. The grand gestures are easy, relatively speaking. They're the moments when the stakes are obvious and the right action is clear and the whole room is watching. What's hard is the ordinary Tuesday, the Wednesday phone call, the Thursday dinner from the Thai place on the corner because it was on the way and she sometimes forgot to eat. Wyatt Mercer had spent 4 years after losing his wife being the kind of man who showed up for everything except the possibility that he deserved something showing up for him. He'd built his whole life around being the one who walked across the floor, toward the patient who needed him, toward the child who needed him, toward the strangers in an airport terminal who needed someone to stop walking and just be in their vicinity for a moment. He was good at it, better than almost anyone. What he'd forgotten, or maybe never fully learned, was that the man who walks across the floor also gets to be on the floor sometimes. Gets to be the one who needs someone to stop. Sienna Ashford had spent a year and a half after her accident building a fortress out of competence, which was understandable when the world keeps telling you that you're diminished, that you're the liability in the room, that your presence is a problem to be managed. Competence is the most honest argument you have. She'd made that argument very well. She'd also made it at the cost of letting anyone see the person making it. What she'd found in an apartment with crayon marks on the table and 14 drawings on the hallway wall was what she'd stopped expecting to find. A place where the argument wasn't necessary, where she didn't have to make a case for herself, where an 8-year-old girl handed her a cookie without any calculation at all. You spend enough time making the case for your own existence, you forget that some rooms just let you walk in, or roll in, as the case may be. That summer was not perfect. Nothing was perfect, which was the whole point, and also what made it worth writing down. Sienna's physical therapy continued through the summer, and there were weeks that were harder than others, weeks where the progress she'd made felt temporary, where pain sat in her lower back like bad news she'd already read and kept having to reread. She didn't pretend those weeks away. She'd learned somewhere between the board meeting and the cookie and the balcony that pretending was its own form of loss, that the people who deserved to know how you were doing deserved actual information, not the managed version. Wyatt was not always calm. He had his own complicated weather, days when the grief of losing Maya came back not as devastation, but as the specific ache of something permanently missing, like a tooth socket that healed over but never fully stopped being aware of the gap. He had a patient die in July, an elderly man named Francis who'd been on his roster for 2 years, and who he'd driven to his sister's place in Maryland twice, and who'd been genuinely funny in the specific way of very old men who'd stopped caring about being appropriate. He didn't handle Francis's death quietly and cleanly the way a certain kind of person handled things. He sat on the balcony at 11 at night and didn't say much, and Sienna sat beside him and also didn't say much, and that was enough. Chloe got in her first real school argument in September. A falling out with a friend named Deja over something that started as a disagreement about a book report and became something more complicated about who got to be in charge of things, which Wyatt recognized as one of the first genuinely adult conflicts she'd have to navigate. She cried about it, which she didn't do often, and she was angry about it, which she did more often. She worked through it over 2 weeks with a combination of her own stubbornness and a conversation with Sienna that Wyatt was not part of and didn't ask about. And by the end of the month, she and Deja had reached something that wasn't quite the same as before, but was functional and honest, which Chloe described as fine, actually. Open Ground received a significant grant in October. The proposal Sienna had rewritten 3 times, the one Wyatt had read at 11 at night and said the third section was too diplomatic, the one that named things instead of gesturing at them. The grant was larger than Carol had expected, which Carol announced by putting the letter on Sienna's desk with a post-it note that said, "See, say the thing." Sienna had kept the post-it. It was taped to the corner of her monitor. The balcony garden went through its cycle. The tomatoes produced more than any of them had expected, which became a logistics problem that Chloe took very seriously, tracking the harvest in her journal and distributing excess to the neighbors on the second floor, Mrs. Park and her husband, who received them with the slightly stunned gratitude of people unaccustomed to being given tomatoes from above. The flowers went through their bloom and then their decline. In November, Chloe and Sienna replanted the boxes with winter herbs, following a plan Sienna had researched with the thoroughness she brought to everything, which Chloe described as a lot of information but mostly right. The rosemary survived the winter. Of course it did. On a Saturday in December, gray outside, cold, the kind of day that turned apartments into their best selves, small and warm and entirely sufficient, Wyatt was in the kitchen making eggs, which he was in fact better at than pasta, when Sienna came in from the living room and stood in the doorway watching him. He turned around because he could feel her watching, the specific quality of it. "What?" he said. "Nothing," she said. "I'm just—" She stopped. "What?" She looked at him. She was in the doorway of his kitchen in December, in the apartment with the crayon mark and the unmatched furniture and 15 drawings on the hallway wall now, the new one added in September, a lighthouse, Chloe's response to the book she'd finished, ambitious and slightly lopsided and completely accurate in all the ways that mattered. She was in the doorway, and she was looking at him, and she had the expression that she still didn't always let herself have in front of people, the one that had nothing composed about it. "I'm exactly where I want to be," she said. He looked at her for a moment. "Yeah," he said. "Me too." She came into the kitchen. She poured herself coffee. She sat at the table with the crayon mark and picked up the section of the newspaper he'd already read, because they'd developed that system without discussing it, the way they developed most of their systems, by just doing the thing until it became the thing they did. From down the hall came the sound of Chloe's door opening and her footsteps, distinct, purposeful. Chloe never moved without intention, and then she appeared in the kitchen doorway in her pajamas, with her hair loose and her current book under her arm, and she looked at the two of them with the expression of someone taking a quiet inventory. "Eggs?" she said. "Eggs," Wyatt confirmed. She climbed onto her stool. She opened her book. She read for approximately 45 seconds and then said, without looking up, "Did anyone water the balcony yesterday?" "I did," Sienna said. "The rosemary side or the flower side?" "Both sides." Chloe turned a page. "Good," she said. Wyatt put eggs on 3 plates. He set them on the table. They ate breakfast, the 3 of them, in the kitchen with the crayon mark and the morning light coming through the window that didn't quite close all the way, and the sound of the city outside doing its ordinary Saturday thing, indifferent and continuous and completely uninterested in the small, specific, irreplaceable life happening in the 3rd-floor apartment of an ordinary building on an ordinary street. Which was the whole point. Not every important thing announces itself. Not every turning point is visible while it's turning. Sometimes the most significant moment of your life looks like a rainy Tuesday afternoon in an airport terminal. Sometimes it looks like a buzzer going off, and a small voice saying hello into an intercom. Sometimes it looks like a scraped arm, and a bandage from a first aid kit that a man has carried in his jacket pocket every day for 4 years because he never stopped being the person who showed up for things. You can spend a long time waiting for your life to look like what you thought it was supposed to look like. The corner office, the right partnership, the structure that proved you were worth the space you took up. You can spend a long time measuring yourself against everything you were told you needed to be, and you can get very good at it, and it will cost you almost everything. Or you can pay attention to the small apartment, to the eggs on the table, to the 8-year-old who leaves gaps in rows of drawings the way other people leave lights on in windows, as signal, as welcome, as the simple radical act of making room. Some people find their family in the place they were born. Some people find it later, in unexpected rooms through improbable circumstances, because someone decided to stop walking across a crowded floor and ask a very simple question: tell me where to put my hands. Wyatt Mercer had stopped walking. Sienna Ashford had said, the frame, right side, near the axle. And Chloe, who was 8 years old and understood most things that mattered, had looked at the two of them from 6 feet away and made a decision that would turn out, in every way that counted, to be exactly right. The eggs were good. The coffee was good. The rosemary was growing. It was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything.